Hello, everyone. My name is Ewelina. I'm a senior instructional designer here in IDA. It's funny how Shampa loves Lego because I'm calling you from Lego Kingdom, Denmark, Copenhagen. Today, I want to talk to you about rapid prototyping for learning experiences, or in more human language, how to show, not tell. I borrowed this phrase from a graphic designer I used to collaborate with, who would always tell me, Ewelina, tell me what you want. Sorry, show me what you want. Don't tell me what you want. And it kind of struck a chord with me, and I borrowed it from him. Anyways, I would like to start with a question. Imagine you're buying a house. I think it can we all can relate to that at some point in our lives. Now, what would you base your final decision on? Would you base it just on a text description? No photos, just description of the house. Would you base it on a technical specification, floor plans, pipes, etc.? Or would you like to actually walk through the house and see the house live, see the real thing? Christopher, if you could put up the poll, please tell us what you would choose. Is it A, B, or C? What would you find your final decision on when it comes to buying a house? I'm extremely curious what you would.
This one's winning with a landslide, by the way.
Let's give it a few seconds.
I don't think I've ever seen a poll with no votes in one of the categories.
It's just well designed. It's just well designed.
Yeah, there you go.
Now, I tried it before, so.
Oh, so I think somebody went and put a vote in one just because I said that. I know who you are. My algorithm does know who you are. You're not anonymous, just for the record.
So could we get the, I can't see the full poll. Could you give me?
Yes, I can give you the answers. So,
yeah.
So the one person who will remain nameless went for text description. 8.799% went for the floor plan and technical specs, and then a whopping 90.66% went for the walkthrough. So, like I said, it was a landslide.
It was anticipated. Now, most of us would want to experience the product that we buy. Now, there is a small group who would go for B, and I call them experts. So people who actually have seen so many of those technical specifications and floor plans and whatnot, that for them, it almost doesn't matter if it's the real house or if it's a technical specification. But most of us want to see the product. And this is the function of prototyping. As simple as that. Now, architects, engineers, interior designers, they have known about it now for years, and they, use those tiny models or rendering. Now we still learn how to do it. One thing is for sure, it works, and I'm going to show you today how. You might be thinking, okay, so it works for, physical, tangible things that you can touch, you can see, you can taste, you can walk through. But does it work for something more abstract, like a learning experience? Well, NASA thinks it does. And this is why NASA prototypes learning experiences for the astronauts before they leave Earth. How do they do it? Well, they use simulators, they use VR training, and as you can see here, they use underwater training. They put astronauts into this giant swimming pool, and they sort of recreate conditions which the astronauts will be faced with up in the space later on. And in this way, they prepare the astronauts for the experience. You might be thinking, well, Ewelina, NASA, seriously, what does that have to do with organizational training? Well, hang on, bear with me. The scale is different, obviously. The risk, definitely different. However, the method is somewhat similar. because you see what NASA does is that they do not recreate space conditions one-to-one. They take what is available, like this giant swimming pool here, and they mimic space conditions for the astronauts so that they are sort of prepared as much as they can be for what's coming. This is how prototyping works in general and rapid prototyping works in particular. Plus, there's the feedback process, of course, when astronauts can give them feedback and then they can, improve this prototyping, etc., etc. So learning experience can be prototyped. How? That would be the best probably question to ask here. Let me tell you a story. The story is this, and it begins with a training development nightmare. I was leading a training development project for a big civil engineering company. Everybody was excited. The leadership team wanted a cutting-edge learning program. And what's important to mention is that the topic of the training was supposed to be the first of its kind in this organization. And it was also extremely important for the organization. Now, this created two things, as you might guess, obstacles. One, because of how revolutionary this training was supposed to be, a lot of high-level stakeholders were involved in this project. A lot of stakeholders from across different civil engineering disciplines. What it brought about is that nobody could agree on what this training was supposed to be like, from content to format to whatnot. The result is presented here on this arrow. Mapping needs and expectations took us 3 months. Mapping knowledge and subject matter experts that we're going to work with took additional 5 months. Now, after 8 months, and I should mention that this project was supposed to take 12 months, after 8 months, we were nowhere near agreeing on the content. And the deadline was 4 months away. As you can imagine, this was not ideal. Now, as every instructional designer or an L&D specialist who develops training, I have a process. It's pretty simple. It's solid but simple. It's based on design thinking principles. And there was one problem with this process in this particular case. It just didn't work. We could not get past the second stage. We couldn't get to the content stage. So I asked myself, okay, Ewelina, what would you do if you had the content? And what I would do is I would prototype, but I didn't have the content. And then I thought, okay, I will just prototype early. I will just prototype because I see no way out of this. So what did I do? I actually focused on two things. First, I decided to find red threads in the available material. I sat in front of my Miro board where I had all the interviews, all the transcripts, all the PowerPoints collected. And I thought there must be what we call reoccurring stories here. There must be things that people say again and again, just using different words. And guess what? There were actually 3. One, there was a need for a shared vocabulary. 2, there was the importance of interviewing PMs about real project examples from this organization. And 3, there were the expectations for the future. Now, once I narrowed down this content to those 3 themes, I was extremely happy. I'm the kind of person who thinks that 3 is a magic number. So to validate this, I went to ask for approval from 3 key stakeholders. You might be now wondering what happened. They were happy. happy is an understatement. Okay. They were ecstatic to see this because they felt like the project is stuck. And here there was actually a proof of things progressing. Now, once I got their approval, things were suddenly running pretty smoothly. Subject matter experts were working on respective chapters. Everything was, the magic was happening, because you see, what happened here is that the prototype grounded the conversation. We were talking not about abstract ideas, visions, expectations, but about filling in the gaps. Now, when you are developing a training and you have 10 stakeholders at the table, you can be sure that you have at least 10 visions of this training at the table. What prototype does is that it brings all those visions home. So we are no longer discussing what people think this training should be, but we are discussing the training which is developing right in front of our eyes. And what's more, we are co-creating it, because each and every draft is based on our feedback. The second point that I apply to the rapid prototyping is applying learning design early. So for each of those parts, the dictionary, the project, and the future expectations, I suggested specific designs, specific formats, which again, I got my approval for. The story ended well. We actually launched on time. Well, we had a 3-week delay, but really it's nothing. But I learned my 4 lessons here. 1, start prototyping as soon as you can. The more stakeholders are involved, the higher the level of the stakeholders, the more complex the content, the better it is if you start prototyping early. Why? Because your discussions will be focused on what matters the most. You will not compromise the quality, quite to the reverse. Lesson number 2, rapid prototyping will save you time. For me, it's almost obvious. But again, it's not about saving time just for the saving time's sake. It's about getting rid of the fluff and focusing on what really matters. Number 3, always choose tools that allow you to prototype quickly. On any given day today, I would rather choose a tool which is fairly simple but lets you prototype things quickly, rather than a very sophisticated tool with a plethora of options, which makes prototyping difficult. Or it does allow you to prototype, but the prototype is very technical and stakeholders can't really read through it. And finally, last but not least, prototyping is a hands-on experience for stakeholders. They can see the progress happening right here and there, right? They don't have to imagine it. They can give you very specific feedback to very specific elements of the prototype. It's just better. So I learned my lesson the hard way so that you don't have to. Thank you so much for listening. I hope there are some questions.
Oh, and questions there will be. This has been fantastic, and hopefully it doesn't take my mic too long to heat up, but I'm going green, so you should be able to hear me. So Ewelina, thank you so much for this, and I personally want to just sit and chat with you for a bit. So we're gonna have a good time with this. But can we get a round of emojis first before we even get into the Q&A for our guest here?
Could I introduce an element of surprise to our Q&A?
Yeah.
I know it's normally audience asking the speaker, but I actually do have a question, because I think there's a lot of knowledge in the room always.
Yeah.
I start prototyping rapidly using, red threads, reoccurring red threads, and then applying design principles early. But I'm curious what our listeners would do
Okay.
with rapid prototyping? Like, what is it that they apply to that works?
Okay.
I mean, I'm curious to hear.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I know some of the questions that were coming in is like, what tools do you use? What ways are you using it? How are you actually doing that? Because it's one thing to say, hey, create a rapid prototype. And you're like,
Mm,
well, what does that mean? So definitely share in the chat if you have some of these things. But yeah, I think while they're doing those, it'd be awesome to just hear, like, what tools do you use? I mean, obviously it looks like you have Miro boards that you help with some of these. Are there any other like tools in your like toolbox that you go to?
7 taps.
Okay. Okay.
And I don't say it just because we're here at 7 Taps Microlearning Conference, but it's really a tool that allows me to prototype extremely
Okay.
fast.
Okay.
I use Genially quite a lot.
Okay.
It's a cloud solution for all sorts of interactive elements,
Okay.
which works really great. I use Hazine, which is
Okay.
like an online flipbook solution.
Okay.
As well. I use Lumen 5 for videos, which allows you to prototype really fast videos, actually. Powtoon for animations and videos as well. So there is a number of tools today you can use that let you prototype quickly. But this is one of the things I always
Yeah.
check with the tool, that, how quickly can I create something
Exactly.
to show to my stakeholders?
To mock it up. Because I mean, the goal with the whole prototyping is, and I think sometimes this can be difficult for designers, is we can get hung up on like the details of trying to get the prototype perfect versus going, the goal is not to get it perfect. The goal is to be able to represent it well enough that people go, oh, that's what you're thinking. Like
Exactly.
that's the level of detail you're going into versus,
Exactly.
oh, I got to make sure it's formatted and everything's because you'll end up wasting a ton of time.
And you're discussing what people imagine rather than, because we explain it with words and then people imagine things and they don't really, everybody imagines something else. So you're like working with people's imagination rather than solid concrete.
Yeah. Well, and it's so funny because it's not limited to our industry, but I see it. I saw this a lot at the executive level when like my team members over the years would come, present things. Like you said, they'd talk about this stuff. And we forget business stakeholders, and they have no idea what we're talking about. So when we're like, oh, we're going to do a micro learning with a video, they're like,
micro what?
Yeah. So what does that even mean?
Yeah.
Type of a thing. And then they just gloss over. And then that's where, because one of the questions was, how do you manage expectations? Because people may see it or hear it and go, yeah, okay, like I'm generally on board with that. And they'll nod. And then then you put the work into it and they're like, yeah, no, that's not really what I was thinking at all. Or they have very detailed expectations around what they want. Yeah. Well, that's not what I had in my head, which I think prototyping can help reduce that risk, but it's real.
Absolutely. I mean, this is exactly where it helps. Because I mean, we've developed so many trainings. We've seen this over and over again. People have really different ideas of what this training will be. And then you bring it to the table and you show them what it will be. And obviously, is the prototype the same as the final product? No, but that's the point of the prototyping. You get feedback, you apply this feedback, you move on. So at the end, there's a higher chance that you will not hear disappointed because they actually delivered the feedback as we went with it. So this is how it helps. And you can definitely manage expectations with it.
It makes, I learned very early in my career the hard way on this, where, you spend all this time, you get it perfect and pristine, and then you show it to your stakeholders and you're like, ta-da! And they're like, I hate it. And you're like, wait, what? No. You can't hate it. Like, we can't be here right now. And I think this is such an important
too late for it to hate it.
Right. It's too late. I'm already done. And they're like, yeah, well, no, you're going to need to go back and redo this from scratch. And you're like, oh, crap. So no, I think it's a really good point. And it goes back to one of the things that, you talked a lot about that I think is really important that we forget is it can seem like this is more work or we're going slow.
Yeah.
But I think what we often forget is how much time and effort is wasted when we do what we were just laughing and joking about, where you kill yourself trying to get it perfect only to just have it hit like the Titanic by a torpedo and the whole thing sinks and you're like, well, now I'm back at square one. Versus if you can do iterative prototyping, you can bring them along for the journey and not completely get annihilated.
Yeah, getting back to the house example, you know, imagine just saying, somebody tells you, we will build you a house, see you in a year, you know. Instead, like, you're there at the building site every freaking day to just see what's happening, what the progress is, right?
Yes. So do you on that topic, I'm curious, do you have any recommendations? Because this ties to a question that I see in here is somebody asked how detailed, but I think it's less about how detailed and how frequent, because it's not about I did a prototype once, so we're good.
Yeah.
Because it's about, no. Where are we in the journey? How are you continuing to iterate that prototype? Do you have any best practices that you would share on that?
How detailed, it really, really depends, I would say, on how much content you already have.
Okay.
How much, how much you have managed to collect by now. Because sometimes you can go more into details, sometimes much less. Like me in this case, I couldn't go much into details. What I had to start with was just 3 main themes, 3 main red threads. So I would say as detailed as you can, but don't polish your videos. This is actually my strong advice. Don't polish prototypes, because then they're actually much easier to redo. People are not so afraid when people see, oh, this video is almost ready. If I say something now, they will have to redo it. Just do it so that it seems like a draft, right? So that they are not afraid to give you feedback. So they don't need to be polished, but you can go into some details. Sometimes it helps, but I would say sometimes you just can't because you don't have.
Well, and what I like about what you said there, and this is a really important thing, is fighting that tendency to get it perfect can actually be an intentional ploy. Because to your point, if people feel like it's too polished,
it's our secret.
Right. Sometimes people are like, well, I would recommend change, but I feel like it's a little too far. So, I mean, you can play with that carefully. Sometimes you want to polish it up a little bit so that you can push back on that stakeholder.
So you just get a yes.
Can't you just like redo this whole thing? Because again, nobody understands what goes into this. I just love when you have like a video and somebody goes, could we just like change it? No, we're on the final draft. This is the first time you've opened your mouth in like 2 months. No, we're not changing it. Thank you, Bill. Go back.
And that's another way. Prototyping and collecting feedback on prototypes also filters out stakeholders who don't really care.
It does.
My point is, and use it also strategically. Because if they don't give you feedback along the way, if you had 3-4 feedback rounds and they didn't show up, then I'm sorry.
Right.
We're here to get the approval now and not to collect feedback on the content. So this also builds up the process.
It does. And everybody's laughing at my Bill comment because there's always a Bill that always has something coming in at the 11th hour. But I think that's also one of the things that you can highlight on that I think ties well to what you're saying is setting expectations for what kind of feedback you're looking for this prototype.
Yes.
And saying at this stage, we're looking at UX or we're looking at this kind of stuff. So please don't give me feedback on the colors or not the time for that type of a thing. And then that way, when Bill says, can't we redo the whole structure? You go, sorry, Bill, that was 6 weeks ago and you didn't say anything. So unfortunately, that window's closed. And I think that's a really good way to handle it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. I fully agree. And I borrow the phrase, sorry, Bill.
Yeah.
I use it from now on.
All right. Perfect. Well,